Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm going to go through how I use accordance to search for specific constructions in the Greek New Testament. Along the way, I'll explain tips and techniques that help in creating a search to find what you want, then to filter out incorrect results, to adjust the search to find more examples, and so on. I'll take as an example for these few videos a query that came up on the Accordance forums a few months ago now. And here's that query. The Accordance forum post URL is there in case you wish to look it up and read through it yourself. The basic question though is this: how do we construct a search to find constructions like that highlighted in red from Mark 4:41? O anamos ke thalassa upakui. In English, we would use a plural verb in this sort of construction. In Greek, although that does occur, it also quite frequently occurs in the singular. So let's see the various ways we might go about this search. In the first video, we'll use a search box query, and in subsequent ones, we'll use construct and syntax searches. We'll look at false positives and false negatives in this video, and then how to deal with them in subsequent videos. So what's the basic approach? Alright. Get an example. Know what you're after. If you can get more than one, great, as this will help you identify the essential and the non-essential features. But work with whatever you have. Examples could come from lexica, from grammars. For example, Wallace in Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics, he lists verse references of constructions that you can use to compare your results with if you're looking for specific constructions. Other grammars will do the same thing. They'll describe a construction and give verse references and so on. Or it could just be from something you found while reading. So get an example. Second, you need to extract the significant features of the construction so that you can create a search that'll find constructions that have those features. As you extract these features, you may well decide a feature is significant only later to find that it really isn't. Of course, the reverse is also possible, that you decide to or happen to ignore a feature only later realizing that it's very important. As you go through more examples, you'll see more clearly which features are and are not essential, but initially construct some set around which to define the search. Begin with something simple and extend it. I do not usually get the entire search right the first time. I generally start with some portion of the search, and then once that is doing the right thing, I'll add more details until I get what I want. Finally, cross-check your results. Once you have a set of results that look okay, you'll need to cross-check those results somehow. There are many reasons that a set of results which initially look good look decidedly less satisfactory after you review them. You can check with examples in grammars or lexica. You can do the search in a different manner and check those results. You can read all the hits and decide on each case yourself. In fact, you'll very likely do all of these. You certainly cannot quote numbers of constructions of a type without verifying that the hits you get are correct. Once you have cross-checked the results or reviewed them, you may want to refine and run the search again, and you'll iterate over this process until you're satisfied. Okay then, let's take another look at the example in Mark 4:41 and go through this process of extracting the key features so that we can construct our search. Okay, the first feature is the distance between the substantives. You will expect that you need to constrain these to be comparatively close together if they're going to be a compound subject. So somehow we have to constrain that distance. The substantives are nouns. They're not participles or adjectives, so we'll constrain them to be nouns. The substantives are singular. Now, I say here not expressed because we will not cover that in our query. We will allow them to be either singular or plural. But we'll have taken a conscious decision to do that, not accidentally have left it out. There is a conjunction between the nouns. That conjunction here is ke, and the verb upakui is singular. And that's important because we want a compound subject with a singular verb. Alright, there's one other feature which you may have spotted, which I haven't mentioned, which is that both nouns are articular. We are going to discard that constraint, and we will allow them to be either anarthrous or articular. If in your own research such a thing was significant, then you'd have to include it in either form, either insisting that they be anarthrous or that they be articular. In our case, we'll deliberately decide to take no position on that. All right, let's take those features then and look at how it runs in accordance. This is my workspace. I have an examples tab here which has our one example, but when I'm looking for constructions, I'll often have an examples tab that'll have a handful of examples, and this allows me to cross-check my results, make sure that my query gets all my examples. But in the case where I'm using something like the syntax search, I can also bring up the syntax chart in parallel here and see how it's been modeled, and that helps me build up the search itself. All right then, next to it, I then have the query tab itself. So the query here is actually quite straightforward. We have a noun in the nominative, followed by, within 2 words, the conjunction care, followed by, within 2 words, a noun in the nominative. That's our compound subject. Then we have followed by, within 4 words, the verb in the singular. All right, why 2 and 4 as our differences? Well, the 2 between the nouns and the care allows for enough space to have an article or not, or an adjective or not. The within 4 words at the end allows for a little bit of slop for adverbs and adjectives and so on, and then finally finding the verb in the singular. Those numbers can be tweaked a little bit if it helps your various queries. All right, also, one final word about this. Accordance does not recommend running searches with multiple followed by within words queries like this. This is known to be problematic, and Accordance will display a pop-up dialog the first time you do a search of this type, and it will recommend that you use a construct search. Fine. For this example, we'll run it this way, and then you'll see some of the differences between this and the construct search. All right, so let's look through the results that we get from this query and see what we got. So first, Mat 619. This one is clearly a valid hit. Moth and rust will cause it to vanish. And note, these are both anarthrous, unlike our example, which is articulate. 917 is odd for 2 reasons. First, we don't highlight 2 nouns. We have 2 nouns, ascu here, a nominative plural, and unos, but only unos is highlighted. I can't actually explain why. In addition, uascu has regnunter here as its verb, so this is not really a valid hit of a compound with a singular verb. Unos has its own verb, but it's separate and specific to unos itself. So this isn't a false positive. It's a hit we didn't want. It doesn't really match what we're looking for. 1231, amartia ke blasphemia apathesite. Perfect. That's another valid hit. 1250 is interesting and worth a moment to speak about. This has multiple nominatives, and it has a verb here, but it isn't actually a hit. And the reason it isn't is because this is actually a predicate nominative portion of a predicate nominative construction, and the actual subject is avtos. So this one is not a valid hit. You'll notice 1415 is also a little odd. We've highlighted a couple of verbs. Again, this is very like the 917, where we have an actual verb here, eremos estino topos. It has its own verb, and then down here, parelthen applies to ora. So again, they each have their own verb. Okay, so you can see you get some false positives and some valid hits. Sakske ema uk apocalypsin. This is valid, singular verb. This time, interestingly, one thing that I hadn't thought of, in this space here where we've allowed a little extra space between the final nominative and the verb, we've got room for a negation. So that's nice. And so it goes on. 2435 is valid, Uranos ke paralefsete. So interestingly, Uranos is not highlighted. All right. So the real thing, so we're getting quite a number of false hits, but we are getting valid ones as well. All right, let's move down to see if Mark 441 shows up. It does. Here it is. Animos is not highlighted, which is a little off, but otherwise the hit itself is there. All right then. So there are a couple of things that we could try here that would be interesting. In particular, we have some hits here that are caused by having, perhaps by the within distances. So one thing you could change is the within distance. We are using ke as a conjunction. You'll see in other cases that in fact ke is not the only conjunction that could be used. Any coordinating conjunction might validly be put in here. So we could, for example, put conjunction coordinating and rerun the query. Oh, look at that. Matthew 6:20 shows up, and in this case, instead of ke, we have ute here in the place of the conjunction. So that's a valid hit, but it was previously excluded by our query. So that would constitute a false negative. It's a hit that we probably really do want, but it was excluded because our query specified ke, rather than being a little more liberal in its specification of the conjunction that we wanted, as this one now is. Okay, so that gives you a little flavor for what we've got here with the search box query, and some of the background as to how we will formulate such searches. Next time we'll come back and we'll do it using a construct search, and we'll compare the results. Thanks for watching.